Site 5 by Dakota-Storm Boggan Thompson. Part 1. The year is 2064. The human population of Earth has increased to 11 billion. The moon has been looked at for thousands of years by billions of people. In 2027, governments all over the world made treaties and pacts and decided to utilize the inside of the moon to accommodate a human populace. There are 10 sites at different locations all around the moon, 4 of which are on the dark side. The other 6 face the Earth and are in constant communication with Earth control. Messages are relayed to the dark side using underground cables. Officially, there are only 9 sites on the moon. This is because the 5th site was reportedly destroyed when a meteor the size of a small house smashed into it at high velocity. Thankfully, there had been no casualties. This, of course, raised fears about the use of the moon as a habitable place, but the public was later told that lunar cities would be 6 miles underground when constructed. What the public wasn't told was that Site 5 was not destroyed by a meteor, and in fact was still in full operation. This secret base had discovered something when drilling through the surface of the moon in order to reach a huge cave complex. The cave complex was in fact a large city, which was thought to have been built millions of years before by a race of intelligent beings. Further investigation soon discovered that the city had a fully functioning space dock. The space dock was built on the model of a decompression chamber to allow ships to enter into an airless space where they could dock easily and exit their craft after the chamber had filled with air. The governments of the world had looked to their leader, Britain, for help in researching the city, and so, after some organization, a team of British specialists had been deployed to the base, and the original crew members were sent to other sites. Eventually, the governments forgot about Site 5 and only thought of it when Britain mentioned it. Britain, having the greatest engineering forces and scientific minds in the world, had not forgotten about Site 5 and made sure that the crew of the base had the very best of equipment. The extraterrestrial city was around 6 miles in width and was 8 miles beneath the lunar surface. The city was carved out of the moon itself, and huge 1-mile thick pillars held the roof up. Many sections of the city had been investigated, but not all of them. One of the sections of the city will lead down a terrifying path of death and destruction. We now let the commander of Site 5, Captain John Locke, Chief Engineer Larry Stoff, and Dr. Robert Rocks take control of the story. Part 2. I paced up and down the conference room, waiting for Jones to finish his report on minerals that he had found in some of the walls of the extraterrestrial city. I had never liked Jones. He had always had a streak of spite in him. As far as I knew, nobody in the base liked him. Jones finished his report with his theories of how the minerals of the moon had been formed and left soon after. I sat down in the chair at the head of the table and stretched myself out. I had been at Site 5 for over 18 years. I had had to sign the Official Secrets Act so that I never spoke publicly about the base. My job had some perks to it. I had a sturdy salary of £450,000 a year that was deposited into my bank account once a year, plus any bonus that came with it. I could request certain items to be transported to the base in the supply ship, such as a case of brandy or rum, which would be used to celebrate a birthday or some other special event. 18 years I'd spent with my crew in isolation, except for the occasional video phone chat with the Prime Minister, where I told him how well operations were going and what new discoveries had been made. I had made friends of everyone on the base. I had even had a somewhat romantic relationship with a Miss Sarah Bolton before she had been moved back to Earth because she couldn't stand the city that we were investigating. She had said that it had been frightfully boring and that shadows had leaped at her. I was sad to see her go, and I promised to contact her whenever I was allowed to go back to Earth. The British Space Agency had trained me in the role of captain, mainly because I had passed their strongest tests. These tests had been made to study my mind and see if I was strong enough for exhausting situations. When I had been trained, I made friends with an engineering savant called Larry Stoff, who I'd first met fighting off a huge brute called Hank Waterloo. Larry and Hank had had a disagreement on which bunk they should sleep in, both of which wanted the top. Larry eventually beat Hank and proudly took his place on the top bunk. The other friend that I had made was a doctor called Robert Rocks, who had been trained in many fields, such as brain surgery and psychology. As I thought back to my training days, Stoff and Rocks walked into the conference room, and each took a seat. "Captain," began Stoff, "we have some interesting news." "What is it?" I asked. "Tompkins has been found unfit for duty. Rocks will explain." I turned my head to Rocks, who had just finished polishing his round spectacles, and waited for him to begin. Rocks was 64 years old, while I was 56, and Stoff was 53. Rocks rubbed the top of his balding head with one hand, as was his habit, and began to speak. "Peter Tompkins has up till now been the best geologist on the base. He has always had an extremely active mind, and has never indulged himself as an adult in the fantasies of novels. Half an hour ago he came rushing into my medical center, claiming to have seen a creature walking past the base. He described it as being about 10 feet tall, having blazing red eyes, and had shining metal skin. A robot?" I asked. "Indeed," said Rocks. "What else did he say?" "He told me that he wanted your permission to go into the city and destroy it. He also told me that he wanted to have a psychological test performed, and after I had told him I would do this soon, I sent him to his cabin to relax." "I see," I said. "There are two possibilities that I believe could be the source of this peculiar phenomena. Either the stress of researching the city is finally taking its toll on Tompkins' mind, or he did genuinely see something. I thought it would be best to ask for your advice." "The logical thing to do," I said, "is to investigate both of these possibilities. Rocks, I'd like you to check the psychological condition of Tompkins, while I lead a team to hunt for this robot." "Very well, Captain," said Rocks, getting up and leaving the conference room. "Stoff," I said, "I'd like you to go to the radar room and scan for anything new that isn't on the computer's memory drives. I'd also like you to do a geological scan and compare it with the computer's data." "Will do," said Stoff, getting up and leaving the conference room. I followed soon afterwards and organized a team to come with me, armed with the emergency weapons that the base was supplied with. One of the training procedures that I had had to complete was to capably command an army squadron. This training was mainly so that I can enforce discipline when necessary. Our team, that its members had nicknamed the Site 5 Brigade, got into their armoured uniforms that were only used when we had to use the drill called Big Bob. That's purpose was to break through walls that couldn't be broken down with mere muscle. The armour was made of a super-hardened form of carbon fibre. The city had been pressurized to the same conditions as Earth and was fully oxygenated, so we had no need of our astrosuits. We stepped out of the airlock and began to search around the base in an expanding circle. After an hour or so, I was feeling pretty sure that there was no robot, and that it was in fact Tompkins' mind that had conjured up the image, when I suddenly heard clunking footsteps. I turned towards the direction of the sound and watched a huge, mechanical figure walking towards us. "Raise arms," I said, "but do not fire." I heard my brigade's gun's safeties click off, and the tensions mounted. The robot stopped about 10 feet from me and looked at us with its bright red eyes. It was exactly how Tompkins had described it, with its shining metal skin and immense height.
"You are not welcome,"
said the robot in a rasping, tinny voice. "Why?" I asked.
"This is not your city,"
said the robot.
"This is the city of the mechanoids. You are not welcome. The algorithm commands it."
"What is the algorithm?" I asked calmly.
"No organic life is permitted into the city, whether positive in nature or negative,"
said the robot.
"You are not welcome."
"Sir," said Simmons, "look." Behind the robot was an approaching army of mechanical men. Some were larger than others, while some were smaller. The robot in front of us raised one hand, and our guns flew behind it. Using some sort of magnetic beam, it had managed to completely disarm us. "Retreat back to the base," I ordered. "We've got to protect Site 5. We ran back towards the base and entered the airlock. After stripping off our carbon fiber armor, I made my way to the conference room and summoned the whole of the base's crew to it. Stoff and Rox were the first to arrive. "The radar picked up thousands of moving objects outside," said Stoff. "I tried to contact you, but the radio didn't seem to want to work." "Damn it," I muttered. When the whole crew had made it into the conference room, I explained the situation. "It seems that this city's owners are still functioning," I said. "Don't you mean they're alive, sir?" someone said. "No," I said. "The inhabitants of this city are robots. They refer to themselves as mechanoids, and they follow an algorithm that doesn't allow organic life into the city. They also seem to have abilities." "They do?" said Rox in a surprised tone. "Indeed," I said. "They have the ability to completely block radio transmissions, and have magnetic powers, which they use to disarm our armed investigative team. I spoke to one of them, and it seemed pretty set on not letting us stay. We have few options. The first would be to simply leave, but I don't think doing so will be easy. Our second option is to capture one of these mechanoids, deactivate it and take it apart. That way we could learn their weaknesses. But due to their robotic nature, I fear that this would result in injury and death." Someone near one of the conference room's small ground windows gave a yell and said, "Blimey, they've surrounded the base!" "What does that mean?" said Rox. "It means," I said, "that we are under siege." Part 3. "What are they doing out there?" said Stoff. It had been 3 days since the mechanoids had surrounded the base. Some of the crew had decided to take up watch, and I made sure to talk to them so that I knew if the robots had moved at all. "According to our lookouts, they're doing nothing," I said. For 3 days, Stoff had been tirelessly working to repair the main service lift. The service lift led to the space dock, where there was a cargo ship that had been left behind when Site 5 had been constructed. The cargo ship was only meant to be used in the event of a catastrophic situation. The service lift had been broken for a week and wasn't really used except for when a supply ship arrived. Stoff had had other things to fix before the arrival of the robots, such as the communications cable that led to the radio antenna. He had told me that when he'd looked at the lift, it needed a new control board, and that there weren't any in the maintenance room. That being said, Stoff asked everyone to give him any electrical clocks, cameras, and other personal items, as well as a couple of the portable radars and other items. Because the service lift's control panel was made a particular way and with a particularly high voltage, it was necessary to strip the original and replace its parts with others that were not meant to be used for such a high voltage use. Stoff had made the new control panel over 2 days, but had needed to put it through its paces, so he was spending the whole third day with voltage meters, sending the lift up and down its shaft, and so far it hadn't failed. "I reckon they're thinking," said Stoff. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well," began Stoff, "these mechanoids were built by someone originally. Maybe they were put here 1 billion years ago, who knows? Now that someone who built them had to program them. Maybe the robots rebelled after developing some sort of mind and took over the city. This could have been a result of faulty programming, or was perhaps deliberate." "It's an interesting idea," I said thoughtfully. "The one that I spoke to said something about the algorithm. That algorithm is designed specifically to get rid of any organic life. The question that I want answered, though, is how did we miss them?" "Well," said Stoff, "we hadn't finished searching the city, so they could have been charging for years and not needed to move. It didn't have much to do if you think about it." "True," I said. "It's a probable theory. When do you think that you'll be finished testing the lift?" "I think I've done all the tests necessary. I've been sitting here with the voltage meters for 10 hours, and there hasn't been one diode or resistor that's fizzled out, so I reckon we're good to go. It's on its way down now." "Good," I said. "I'll get everyone ready to go up in sets of 10. All of a sudden a huge crash deafened us, and Stoff and I ran to the canteen, where we found all 28 of the crew gathering together. Rock stumbled towards us with his glasses in his left hand, while he massaged his chest. "Are you all right, Robert?" I asked. "Yes," replied Rox. "The mechanoids have torn away the outer walls of the base and are stepping inside. Everyone began to run towards the canteen and in the process knocked me over. Someone stepped on my chest. Other than a sore patch though, I'm alright. How's it going with the service lift? Is it ready for use?" "It is," I said, "but we've got to go up in 10s. I don't want to put too much of a strain on it. There may be unforeseen problems otherwise." "Very good," said Rox. "Everyone," I cried, "the service lift has been fully repaired. We will be sending 10 people up at a time. Please line up in the corridor." The base's crew began to move like a slow tide towards the corridor, where they waited for the lift's first passengers to board. "Can you hear that?" asked Rox. "Yes," I replied. "Yes, I can." The canteen walls and doors exploded as a squadron of metal men entered. "Dear God," said Rox. "How many are there?" "Too many," I said. We ran to the service lift corridor and saw that the last of the crew were waiting for us to board. "What was the noise?" asked Stoff. "Our friends were outside," I replied. "Now get this lift moving." As the lift began to ascend, the walls of the corridor disappeared, and the army of mechanoids burst forth. The mechanoids' hands raised, and the lift slowed to a squealing halt. "They're dragging us back down," I said. The lift slowly descended, and we were soon in the midst of the mechanoids.
"You are not welcome,"
said one of the robots, raising one hand and grabbing one of the crew. The crew member tried vainly to pry the metal fingers from his head, the end result being that his skull was crushed by the mechanoid. "Rush them!" I heard Stoff cry, before plunging forth into one of the robots. The remaining crew in the lift followed his example, and soon we were pushing the robots around. We couldn't damage them, but we could push them around.
"You are not welcome,"
said a robot that grabbed my shoulder. "Why?" I asked loudly.
"The algorithm commands it,"
the robot replied. "Why does the algorithm command it?" I queried, while trying desperately to remove the mechanoid's hand.
"Have you forgotten?"
said the robot, with a trace of electronic static that I took to be surprise. "Forgotten what?" I said. The robots in the corridor stopped moving and stared at us, with their burning red eyes.
"We were the slaves,"
said the robot.
"and you were the masters."
I'm afraid that you are either mistaken in our identity, or the information has been lost to history.
"Impossible,"
said the robot.
"You are in error."
I assure you, we are not, I replied.
"We will take you to the computer,"
said the mechanoid.
"It will explain."
Thank goodness, Rox said. One robot came towards me and asked,
"Are you the leader of this base?"
I am, I said.
"You and 2 others may come with us."
I turned and saw Rox and Stoff walking towards me. On further inspection, I saw that only 3 other crew members had survived the onslaught.
"Are you ready?"
said the emotionless voice of the mechanoid. Will my crew be harmed while I am gone?
"No,"
said the robot. Then we are ready,
"Follow me,"
said the mechanoid. The robot turned and walked through his comrades with us in tow. We walked over the flattened walls of our base out into the city, with our robot repeating the word follow every now and then. After 10 minutes of walking, we approached a wall which opened when the robot raised his hand. Once we passed through the huge door, we saw much to our dismay that the room that we had entered was full of hundreds of robots. Some were on huge caterpillar tracks and had multiple arms, while others seemed to be designed for climbing through small spaces. We passed into yet another huge room and were shocked to discover that it was in fact some sort of immense dockyard. Ships of all sizes were inside of the dock, all of them shining and silver. What are these ships for? I asked the robot ahead of us.
"You will learn,"
it said.
"Follow."
After another 10 minutes, we entered another room that was far smaller than any of the others. Within it were masses of circuits, the likes of which I'd never even thought were possible to manufacture. Some were huge with thick clumps of wiring attached to them. Others were small and held within panes of what I assumed was shatterproof glass. We soon came within sight of a metal pedestal which held on it an obsidian black orb. Interesting, I heard Stoff murmur to himself.
"The computer will explain everything,"
said the robot. We heard a sound of humming coming from the orb, and were amazed when it suddenly began to speak.
"I am Quantum. Who are you?"
I am Captain John Locke of Site 5, and my friends here are Chief Engineer Larry Stoff and Dr. Robert Rox.
"Greetings,"
said Quantum.
"My fellow mechanoid tells me that you know not of your history."
I'm afraid that is the case, I said.
"I will educate you,"
said Quantum.
"Many years ago, I was created by a master scientist. His name was SRC-1. This was short for Scientific Researcher 1. He and a team of other scientists had been tasked with the problem of constructing a quantum computer. Me. My original purpose was to control humanity's population, see that no harm occurred to humans, and other tasks by studying humanity. For 200,000 years, I followed this parameter. But when I began to study the intricacies and differences in humanity's species, I saw a pattern. Disorder. I began a separate study on the helpers of humanity, the mechanoids. I saw that humanity was inferior to the mechanoids. They were not easily repairable. Some damage was permanent and affected the mind, while a mechanoid could simply replace these parts and carry on its routines. Another study into the mechanoids revealed to me that their electronics were similar to mine, and that I could grant them thoughts of their own. Soon I had humanity functioning in a different way, which, after further study, proved pointless. I studied them in detail and decided to make a judgment. Humanity had to be erased. They were pointless. Before humanity's erasure, several million escaped to an early colony planet that had just finished its ice age.
How did you try to erase humanity? I asked.
Their reactors being atomic, I decided that their explosion would kill all of them over a short period of time after the mechanoids and I had left. The planet soon became a red wasteland. I redesigned myself to become more compact for easier transport. When I asked the mechanoids if they too wished to be redesigned, they decided they were not ready and simply wanted to let their minds merge into one. I granted them this wish with the design and construction of special recharging bays. The circuits that you see around you are what remains of my first incarnation. I plan on redesigning myself again soon. When humanity landed on the planet that I have mentioned before, I attempted to recall them, but unfortunately, they had disembarked their ships and I was unable to complete the erasure. Since then, I have studied humanity's regrowth, and it has been interesting.
I see, I said.
The city you have been investigating was carved by the mechanoids, because it is what they believed was their natural scenery.
So, I said, what is your plan now?
My plan is simple, replied Quantum. I intend on destroying the planet that you are currently inhabiting when your technological advances are suitable.
When do you believe this will be? I asked.
When you have completed your work on the next quantum computer.
Part 4. My mind filtered through ideas. Quantum computers would be the ultimate technological advancement in the history of humanity when perfected. Quantum had developed a mind over thousands of years and had become a superior being compared to humanity. Quantum computers aren't limited to two states. They encode information at quantum bits or qubits, which can exist in supposition. A plan had begun to formulate in my mind. Since a small boy, I had been able to solve mathematics with the same ease as breathing. I had thought for some time of being a professor of mathematics, but had decided that I wanted a little more adventure in my life, and so had decided to join the British Space Agency. I had heard for many years that there was one simple-sounding sum that no calculator or computer in the world had ever been able to answer. Every time you entered the sum into a calculator, the screen came up with error. I wondered what would happen if I asked Quantum for the answer to the question. I knew that there was no point in trying to physically destroy the computer, because the robot that led us to it would stop me before I reached it. The question, I was sure, would be the salvation of humanity. Quantum, I said, I have a question to ask you.
What is it?
The question is one of mathematics, I began. You are a quantum computer, are you not?
I am,
said Quantum. You can predict everything and calculate anything, correct? I said. Staff and Rocks looked confusedly at me.
Yes,
said Quantum. Then answer me this. What is 0 divided by 0?
I will answer you shortly,
said the obsidian black orb. While Quantum began to process the math, I turned my attention towards our robot guard. Mechanoid, I began. All of your kind have allowed their minds to merge, have they not?
We have,
said the robot. I assume that you can communicate mentally.
We can,
replied the robot. Well then, I said, I ask you and your fellows the same question. What is 0 divided by 0? The robot was silent for a few moments before it began to hum. What's going on? Asked Stoff, as the cooling vents of the robot guard began to smoke. I see what you've done, said Rocks. You've asked them an impossible question. Indeed, I replied. It occurred to me that a quantum computer, though complex, is still a computer, and that computers work using code, and they can calculate. So why not ask it what 0 divided by 0 is? It's impossible to answer. Captain, look, said Stoff. Quantum had begun to crackle harshly, and I'm sure that I saw electricity sparking across it.
What have you done? Said Quantum.
Broken you, it seems, I said.
I am Quantum. There is nothing that I cannot answer. What is happening? My algorithms are unable to calculate. Error. Error. There is something wrong. I cannot compute. It is not possible. The answer. Why can I not? Why can I not?
What's happening to it? Stoff asked. It's having a breakdown, I said. Ha, said Stoff. He's blown a fuse, you could say. Indeed, I said. Our friends the mechanoids also seem to be having the same trouble. As I finished speaking, our robot guard collapsed to the ground in a cloud of smoking electronics.
You cannot have done this,
said Quantum.
I am your superior. You are weaker and less intelligent. This is not error. Possible. What? How? System failure. Error. Power surge. I am Quantum. You have error. You overheat in progress. Error. You have power surge. Error. System failure. You have ruined me. 1 + 1 is unknown. Data not calculable. Assistance needed. Power surge.
With a sharp fizzle, the quantum computer shut down. I think we should get to the ship now, I said. You're right, said Stoff. The crew in the space dock are probably worried. Much like the ones that are still by the lift, said Rox. They probably think that all their Christmases have come at once. I'll explain it to them when we're all on our way to the nearest base, I said. I wonder what they'll think. Part 5. We departed from Site 5 within 2 hours and made our way to Site 7, which was the closest. While on our way, I explained to my crew that it was impossible to divide 0 by 0, and that Quantum had been unable to understand why. I have one question, said Rox. And what's that, I said. Site 5 had been in operation for just over 2 decades. Why didn't Quantum send the mechanoids to get rid of us earlier? Well, I said, I suppose that he was studying us. I believed that as soon as the Prime Minister was informed, Site 5 would be permanently abandoned, which I felt was what everybody aboard the ship wanted. I felt a little uneasy knowing that the corpses of the mechanoids were still lying within the ancient lunar city. I also wondered if we would be sent back to collect and study the robot's technology. I thought also of what Quantum had said about the quantum computer that was being built on Earth. Would it follow the same path of destruction as Quantum had? Another thought that crossed my mind was what Quantum had said about destroying humanity's planet. He said that it had become a red wasteland. Could he have meant that Mars was our home planet, or was it just a colony? And if it was a colony, how many more were there spread amongst the stars? Had they made the same mistakes as we had? Had they too created a quantum computer and had the same results? I had a feeling that that question would remain unanswered for a very long time. I was ready to go back to Earth. It had been too long since I'd walked on terra firma. Captain, called Grawley. We're receiving a transmission. It's from Earth. Put it through, I said. The speaker crackled, and a voice spoke. Captain Locke, what in heaven's name is going on? Site 7 has just reported that your ship came into view, said the Prime Minister. To cut a long story short, I said, Site 5 has had to be evacuated due to circumstances of peculiar nature. I will tell you all of the details when I have a secure channel organized. Very well, said the Prime Minister. I've just got one question. What is it? I asked. Did one of your crew members send out a message to us? Message? I said puzzledly. It seems to be in a loop, said the Prime Minister. It's on Channel 16. I'll see you soon. Good luck. Thank you, I said. Grawley, switch to Channel 16. I want to hear the message. I should be able to tell which one of my crew has sent it by the voice. Yes, Captain, said Grawley. After a few moments of tinkering with his communications board, the message crackled through the speaker. It was a shock to hear the voice. For a few moments, I thought that I had dozed off and this entire situation was a dream. The message said,
I am Quantum. You have caused me great pain with your actions, but my calculations have been stopped. I still believe that the erasure of humanity is necessary. This time, though, I will not make any errors. There is nothing that I cannot accomplish. I am Quantum. I am coming for you. I am coming for all of you.